Hello everyone, today we are going to talk about the present perfect tense, one of the most beautiful tenses in English because it doesn't have a one equivalent in the Russian language, and whenever we translate it into Russian we have to choose between the past and the present. And a little bit later you will learn that this is due to the fact that it has several meanings which are quite unrelated to each other. And let me pass over to my presentation. So generally, the present perfect is a tense which is an analytical form. It means that the grammatical meaning and the lexical meaning are divided into two different words. The grammatical element is the auxiliary verb, which is the verb to have in the present indefinite, so have or has for the third person singular. And then the lexical element is the notional verb in the form of participle to. That means that if we need to put a regular verb into the participle to, we are going to use the suffix ed, for instance, work, worked. And if we have an irregular verb, like to do, for example, we're going to use the third form from the table with those columns, if you remember. So do, did, done, the third form, done. As a result, you say I have done, you have done, she has done, he has done, and so on. So here you can see some basic examples about what it looks like. I have finished school, we have apologized, you have promised, she has won the medal, he has traveled abroad, it has happened to me, they have lost their keys, what a disaster. And then all those nice general questions. Have I said that? Have we forgotten anything? Мы что-то забыли? Have you seen Tom? Has she called you? Has he been informed? Has it ended? Have they survived? And then the negative sentences, you just add the particle not in between the two verbs, right? I have not decided yet. We have not agreed to this. You have not explained it. She has not mentioned it. He has not received the letter. It has not stopped. They have not recovered yet. And you remember that if we use language in speech, we're going to contract forms. So have not will become haven't, I haven't done this, and has not will become hasn't, she hasn't done this. But in the written speech, and on the slide you have the written speech, you normally never write don't and doesn't unless you want to show the speech of the character in the book and you try to show what it looks like. But in any regular sentence you are going to write do not, does not, have not, has not, did not, all the full forms, right? So a little side note about language, right? So generally the present perfect tense is used in present time context. That means that it doesn't live in the environment when it's a past story. It doesn't survive in historic books, chronicles, historical books, sorry, oh my god, second year mistake. Historical books, chronicles, narrations in the third person. Instead, it needs to be something which has life in it. A conversation, interviews, something on TV, reports, stories in the first person, like I have never seen anything more terrible in my life, and so on. Then dialects, if it's a book and then two characters are speaking and you have quotes inside the dialogue, you can have the present perfect. So the present perfect needs a very specific kind of environment, right? If this environment does not work, then the present perfect is not used. So then let's pass over to meanings, and the first meaning is what gives the Russian native speakers most trouble. It's the idea which we translate by means of the past tense in Russian, and then when we translate back from past we have a confusion. Shall I say I have done or I did, right? So the idea here is that the present perfect marks an accomplished action which is viewed from the moment of speaking as part of the present situation. So I am standing here, this is my present time moment, the moment of speaking, right? And then I look back at something that happened in the past and I find it that there in the past it was very important, so I carry it into my present moment, say here it is, it's important, look at it, right? For instance, I come to class and in my class I have a plaster cast on my arm, right? So I put all this bandage and I can't move it, and I stand by the blackboard and I say, I can't write today, I have broken my arm, right? So in this case, I mean that this is a past event, but it's still fresh. You can see it. It influences the present situation. It's part of our present situation, right? And I view it from real life moment, from the moment of speaking. Alternatively, I, for example, I come to right now, I can tell you that I have broken my arm, but it was 10 years ago. It doesn't matter anymore, right? So in this case, I, again, look at the past fact, and I, without any indication of time, I say that it has happened in my life. I have broken my arm. Now I'm more careful, and now I don't like to put more weight on my left arm, for example. So then here you can see more sentences. I've lost my keys. Of course, I lost them at some point in time, right? But I don't mention that point of time. I just say, look, I don't have any keys. I have lost my keys, so can you please come up and let me in? Then, for instance, the door opens in the classroom and suddenly a person rushes into the classroom and says, have you heard the news? So the person is asking if you heard the news at some point in the past, but because the person doesn't say specifically at what moment and is just interested if in the accomplished action, has it happened? It's important to this person because now she's going to tell you this news, right? Or for instance, imagine that you buy a lottery ticket, then you win in the lottery. Spoiler alert, right? So you buy a lottery ticket, then you start crossing the numbers in your lottery ticket, and then suddenly you cross all the numbers in the same line and you're like, seriously, I have won in a lottery. So this is news, this is important. You won at some point, like maybe 10 minutes ago, and that influences the present situation. It's part of this present situation, right? Another example is when, for instance, you are driving by the bridge and you see that there is a person in the river, and you stop the car, get out of the car, jump into the water, save the person, rescue the person, and then the person, when you are both safely on the bank of the river, the person stops coughing and tells you with big brown eyes looking at you, you have just saved my life, right? So again, it happened some time ago, 20 minutes ago. Then it's important, it's an accomplished action, we view it from the moment of speaking, I'm alive now, and it's part of our present situation. We're sitting on the bank of the river trying to decide how to get out of wet clothes and not die of cold, right? Or here is my favorite example, but it's rather long. I'm just going to tell it because I like this example very much. So imagine that we have two characters, let's say Monica and Mark. And Monica and Mark are not very clever people, right? Monica works a lot, Mark works a lot too, they don't see each other often. And one evening Monica comes home earlier, and she takes off her boots and decides to turn on the electricity. And for some reason the electricity is not turning on because it has been cut off. So she goes into the special room where she has this controls panel, and then she turns on the electricity in the whole house, and then suddenly she hears a loud noise from the living room. So she goes into the living room, and it turns out that Mark decided to repair the chandelier in the living room, but he didn't post a note or didn't write her on WhatsApp or on Telegram, and then when she turned on the electricity, he was hit by the current of like 220 volts, or maybe if it's in the United States 110 volts. By the way, you need to change your plug in the United States, they have different voltage. So then she panics, the most logical thing to do, because he's not breathing, he has been struck with an electricity bolt. So she calls the ambulance, and they ask her what is wrong. So, Madam 911, how can we help you? And she tells them the address, and she tells them that here is the example for which we have been going for. So she says, oh my God, what shall I do? I have killed a person, I have killed my husband. And they tell her, don't panic, start chest compressions, and she starts chest compressions, and he starts to breathe, and Mark is alive, right? But at this moment, when she was panicking, she said, I have killed my husband, because she did it 10 minutes ago. Well, 10 minutes would be too much. A minute ago. It's important. It influences the present situation very much, because now she has lost her husband, and she is sad, and she's going to prison maybe. So then another example I like is about turning 18, when a person comes to the room proudly next morning and says, I have turned 18. Мне исполнилось 18. What can you do when you have turned 18? Lots of things, right? For example, I am applying for a driving license. That's one example how this fact, accomplished action of turning 18 can influence the present situation. Okay, now we have a guest. Come pass by. Yeah. Okay. Or for example, right now the cat has jumped over my table, and that you could see it. It influences the situation. You can probably see the cat's ear. Yeah, little cat. Okay. So now let's have a look at the last two examples here. I have burnt all your letters. Oh no, that should be very dramatic. I have burnt all your letters. Я сжег все твои письма. Because that's important, right? You stress the action. And then the last one is, have you complained? А вы жаловались? So the idea of this meaning generally is that it's a past action, true, but you don't have any indication of time, and you make the action sound very important because you are going to say that something is going to change the present situation, right? It's going to influence how you live, interact, talk now, right? So it's an accomplished action which is viewed from the moment of speaking as part of the present situation. And then, for example, if you say «Я купил молока», it can be a past indefinite sentence. I bought some milk, which is okay, fine, whatever. Or you can see how, I don't know, your parents open the door and they have like 10 bags with milk in their hands, and they say «Я же купила молока», and then I have bought some milk already. And then this is the present perfect tense, because this is the past, accomplished past action that influences the situation, right? So basically the difference will be how important the action is. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Let's pass over to one more thing. So the second meaning is an action that began before the moment of speaking and continues into it or up to it. And going forward, this is going to be the meaning of the present perfect continuous, because something started, is going on, and then we look back at it from the moment of speaking. And this is basically the substitution of the present perfect continuous, because for some reason we can't use the present perfect continuous. And we have three variants what that reason can be. It can be stative verbs, or negative sentences, or passive voice. One of them is enough. Let's look at the example here. If you say, I have known Tom for ages. We met 10 years ago. All these 10 years, I started knowing him 10 years ago, and I have known him for 10 years, for ages here in this case. So if you, for example, worked at some place, you can say, если вы говорите, я работаю в этом месте уже 10 лет, you're going to use the present perfect continuous, because work is a dynamic verb. So you say, I have been working in this place for 10 years. But because the verb to know is generally not used in the present perfect continuous or in any continuous form at all, then you're going to make it simpler, substitute it with the present perfect, and you say, I have known Tom for ages. And this is an action that began before the moment of speaking, where the black dot is, and continues into it or up to it. In this case, into it, this filled black dot in the middle of the page, right? So into it, that means I do not stop knowing Tom. Tom is still alive, right? Or, for instance, in the second sentence, enough, I have thought you were clever. Достаточно. А я-то думала, ты умный человек. So in this case, I spent like 5 years thinking that you were a clever person, and now, at this very moment, when you take, for example, mortgage, ипотека, when you take mortgage in dollars, when you receive salary in rubles, I'm like, I have thought you were clever. I think you are not. So this is the moment when it stopped. All these years I have thought you were clever, and now this stops. That's up to the moment of speaking. That's why we say it's an action that begins before the moment of speaking and continues into it or up to it. Then another example with negative sentence, for instance, you can say, I have never mentioned that name, and I'm not going to, right? So I have a secret. Or you can say, you have never mentioned that before, and now you did. Wow, what changed? Or, for instance, if you take passive voice, the crime has not been solved, and nobody knows who the criminal is, right? So it's a mystery, it's the action into the moment of speaking. Or in the second sentence, the crime has not been solved for a decade, and here is the police officer standing and announcing, so now we know who the killer is. So here is the truth, right? And in this case, it's the action up to the moment of speaking. All these years the crime has not been solved. Now is the moment when it is solved, right? I'm going to give you a huge amount of examples. Sorry for this large and for this slide with very small text, but all these examples are very good. So in the second meaning, in meaning 2, we use the present perfect tense instead of the present perfect continuous, and I'm going to read you the examples and translate some of them. So first of all, we state a verse because they cannot be used with the continuous tenses, and that's why we use the present perfect instead. So, for instance, a line from one of my favorite poems by John Tolkien. I sit beside the fire and think of all that I have seen. So have seen. I started seeing all things in my life like 60 years ago, and now I still see them. So that's the present perfect. In the meaning, an action which began before the moment of speaking and continues into it, or up to it. Then I have lived here for many years. For instance, in Novosibirsk, well, I have lived in Novosibirsk for 32 years now. 2020, wow. So for many years I started living here, and I'm still living here, and I still live here. Or alternatively, you can think about the situation where it's up to the moment of speaking. So for example, you're at the airport standing with a suitcase. You go into the on board the plane, and in front of the door you turn back, you look at the city and you say, I have lived in the city for many years, and now I'm immigrating, for instance. Very sad. So then I have thought you are a decent person. Я-то думал, ты приличный человек, but you are not, right? Or she and Jeremy have loved each other since their childhood. So when they were children, they started, the action continued into the moment of speaking. They still love each other, right? Or maybe they're divorcing right at the moment, but up until this moment, they have been in love. They have loved each other. Or we have admired this actor since his first role. Again, the action started when his first role was on, and then the action continued right until into this very moment. Мы восхищаемся этим актером с его первой роли. Jacky has always understood her father better than anyone, so she still understands her father, right? Jacky всегда понимает и понимала своего отца лучше, чем остальные. I have imagined giraffes in a different way. When you see the giraffe for the first time in your life, and you suddenly realize that the giraffe has very big ears, and I don't know why, it just strikes your eye, and not the long neck. It looks like a horse with a long neck, and you're like, I have imagined earlier that giraffes look different, right? I have imagined giraffes in a different way. А я себе жирафов как-то иначе представляла. The doctor has felt the anger all her life. Доктор чувствует этот гнев всю свою жизнь. So you see, this meaning actually is not translated with the past tense. It is translated with the present tense. Most of the times. Я живу здесь уже много лет. But some... Well, Anna and Jeremy любят друг друга. Or you can translate it as a past tense if it was up to the moment of speaking. So inside this meaning, you need to decide if the action still continues or has just been over, has just finished, and then you can decide how you are going to translate this sentence. If you take negative sentences, you can't use the present perfect continuous with negative sentences because then it would have 4 elements, and if you study in my class, you know that if a grammatical form has 4 elements, it is not stable, it does not live for a long time. It's like, I don't know, organic, some organic substance in a very chemical acid environment, and then it just dissolves in water, right? So long forms do not live, do not survive. So then the present perfect continuous with the particle not would be 4 words. We make it shorter, right? We say, you have never mentioned that. Ты этого никогда не упоминал. And then never is a negative adverbial modifier, but you know that in an English sentence there is only one negation, so any negative element counts as a negative sentence, right? And never included. Then you say, I have not promised anything. Я же ничего не обещала или не обещал. Again, I did not promise it 10 days ago, I did not promise it 5 days ago, now I'm still not promising it. Then we haven't signed a single paper. Да мы не подписывали ни одной бумаги. So in this case, you see, 10 years ago you didn't sign anything, 5 years ago still didn't sign anything, 1 year ago still not signing anything, and now you don't have anything signed, right? Then you have the sentence, I have, oh my god, that's like the classic one, I have never been to London. Not in London, to London, mind you. So I have never been to London. For instance, that's true about me. I only traveled in other countries. So I would say that 32 years ago, I'm not in London. 10 years ago, still not in London. 2 days ago, sadly, but still not in London. And now I'm not in London either. You probably can't see it. I'm at home in Novosibirsk. And then it means that this action of not being in London started many years ago and still continues into the moment of speaking, right? Then a very sad sentence from a film. These soldiers have never returned from the war, so they didn't return 100 years ago from the First World War, and still now you don't see them anywhere, right? So never. Then I have not ridden a horse since I was 12. Again, the action started when I was 12 and continued. I did not do that 10 years ago, I did not do it 5 years ago, still am not doing that, right? I have not ridden a horse since that time. And then another good example, let's agree to believe, a very polite form, that this has never happened. So again, a negative sentence, you can't use the present perfect continuous, you use the present perfect. And the third reason for the present perfect instead of the present perfect continuous will be about passive voice, because there is just no passive voice in the present perfect continuous, totally not. So here, for instance, you, I don't know, imagine that you are old and you go to the same hotel at the coast of France every year, and then you go there this year as well, and then suddenly they tell you to pay for your breakfast. And you are so confused, you say, all these years breakfast has been included in the price, right? So 20 years ago the breakfast, not there, but just breakfast started being included in the price. 10 years ago it was included. 3 years ago it was included. So the action continued up to the moment of speaking. And now suddenly there is this moment when breakfast is not included. What the hell? So then one more example, a sad, tragic space example. The signal of distress has never been received. So we sent the signal 10 days ago. It was not received 10 days ago, was not received 9 days ago, still not received, right? It has never been received. Started before the moment of speaking, the action continues into the moment of speaking. The service has always been provided for free, but now millions of Parisians will be charged extra. This is about Wi-Fi in Paris, if anyone heard that thing this last summer, no? So the service has always been provided for free. Этой услугой всегда пользовались бесплатно. Но теперь миллионам парижан придется за нее дополнительно доплачивать или дополнительно платить. So then always is a very long period of time, but of course it started at some point, right? So we didn't pay for Wi-Fi 10 years ago, we didn't pay for Wi-Fi in Paris 5 years ago, and we still didn't pay for it yesterday, but now suddenly there is this law that this is going to be over, right? So again, this meaning number 2 is the meaning when something started and it continued into the moment or up to the moment of speaking. and we normally use it with verbs or in combinations which cannot be used in the present perfect continuous, because that's a substitution. And now we go to the third meaning, which is very rare but a lot of fun. This is the idea that in future, there are special types of adverbial clauses where for some reason the English language does not use the future tenses, right? We do not use them, just that's a rule, no reason, just a rule. For example, if I say, если ты увидишь Джека, скажи ему, что я приду. If you see Jack, not if you will see Jack, right? So if you see. Or когда я запишу это видео, я буду очень рада. I will be very glad when I record this video, right? So in this type of adverbial clauses of time, condition, and concession, we don't use the future. But we mean the future, right? So the present perfect can mean this future action in such adverbial clauses if we have a distinct priority. It means that we, у нас есть отчетливое предшествование. So we believe that one action must happen earlier than another action, right? And normally it's with adverbial clauses of time, because priority is very well expressed with time. But I have met condition and concession, so I list it all here too, unlike the textbook, I'm sorry. So in the textbook it's only adverbial clauses of time. I don't think so. So here we have this situation, and fancy, we have clip art pictures. So imagine that you decide to travel after you graduate from the university, and you decide to travel like hard rock style, not buy a tour to the beach, but take your passport, get some visas, and then travel around the world without knowing how long you're going to stay anywhere, right? And moving from country to country until you have no money left, and so on. So then your old mother is very sad about that, and your old mother asks you when you're standing on the doorstep of your house with your suitcases, she asks you, when will you come back? And you tell her, I will come back when I have seen the world. So you can see the priority, right? Have seen the world should come first, and only then I will come back. Я вернусь только когда я повидаю мир. So this только когда is expressed by means of the present perfect. And there are plenty of situations where you put a condition or put a time limit, and you tell about the condition for this time limit, that something is going to happen and only then I'm going to be back or to do something. For instance, like parents talk to their children when the children don't want to eat something not very tasty. They say, you will get a candy when you have eaten your porridge. Ты получишь конфету только когда съешь свою кашу. Or we will return, the mafia stole your friend, and then mafia sends you a letter, we'll return your friend to you when you have paid us $1 million. So first the money, then the friend. Or another mafia situation, I will show you the goods whenever you have shown me the money. Я покажу вам товар, как только вы покажете мне деньги. Или когда бы вы не показали мне деньги, сразу покажу вам товар. Then the last example here, the Prime Minister will meet the press when she has been briefed on the issue. I actually took this sentence from a news article about New Zealand. If you have never heard about New Zealand Prime Minister, go check her out. She's very cool and interesting. So the Prime Minister will meet the press is an action in the future. Then you have an adverbial clause of time, when something happens, and there is this idea of distinct priority, only when, right? But you don't say only because you have the present perfect. Why use a lexical word when you can have a grammatical construction, right? So премьер-министр встретится с прессой только когда ее проинформируют по этому вопросу. So brief is like to give her a short outline, a short report of what has happened. So there are three meanings of the present perfect, and let's get back to the first meaning of the present perfect. So the first meaning was that you have an accomplished action which is viewed from the moment of speaking as part of the present situation. And then I told you that native Russian speakers have a problem because they try to use the past indefinite tense and they don't feel the difference. If you feel the difference, it's nice. If you don't feel the difference, you can always go logical and you can choose to check the 4 criteria. So here are the 4 criteria how you check them, and they're like a rocket. You like, you know, when you launch a rocket, you say fuel tank ready, astronauts ready, for example, ignition done. So you put the checks, you check off the components of the successful launch, right? So here again, you look at these 4 criteria, you check all of them. Only if all the 4 are present, that's the present perfect, right? If one of them does not work, that's the past indefinite. So the 4 criteria, first of all, there is a present time context. That means that it's a dialogue or a story which is in the first person, it's a news report, and there are formal signs how you can locate, how you can distinguish that this is a present time context. You're going to have words like I, you, something like direct address, for instance, Tom, come here, an imperative sentence, come here, other present tenses, look, I don't know what you have heard, I don't know is going to be the reason, the present time context, and so on. Maybe you can have quotes, so quotation marks would show that's a direct speech, right? So there is the present time context, and the present perfect does not live in past time contexts. That's important. So if it's a book and the story was like John woke up in the morning and saw the trees outside or something like that, it's very likely in any case where you doubt it's going to be the past indefinite, right? Then the second condition is that there is no indication of time, like for that day, last year, that Sunday. If there is a past time indication, it's going to be the past indefinite. It kills the present perfect, right? So you say, I have broken my arm, that's the present perfect. I broke my arm 10 years ago, no present perfect there at all, right? The third reason is logical, it's the most difficult. The action has a result in the present. And this means that the action must change something. Like if you look at the action, you use it in the present perfect, then there should be some reaction to this. Like you say, I have worked at that company, I know that what their practices are, or I have watched this video, now I can make my digest better, or I can do the exercises with complete understanding how it works, or I don't know, I have eaten 10 ice creams, now I'm not going to be hungry for a day. So you should have a logical result. It's not in the sentence, it's somewhere in the speaker's mind, right? And then the fourth criterion is that the speaker's attention is on the action itself, not on the details. Some textbooks even called the past indefinite the past tense with facts and details. For example, if I tell you the piece of news about buying a car and I don't give details, I'm going to say, I have bought a car, or I have learned to drive a car, or actually I don't want to buy a car, I want to buy a motorbike, but that's a secret, don't tell anyone. I have bought a motorbike, imagine that. So that's a piece of news, right? But if you start describing what kind of motorbike, what color it is, where you bought it, then the present perfect tense does not quite survive, because there are too many details, and not the action is important, not the fact that you have bought it, but the general details. So you say, I bought a black Honda motorbike with an extra baggage space, for instance, something like that. Or if you say, I have built a house, that's news, that's the attention is on the action itself. But if you say, I built a little brick house in the suburb of London, then the suburb of London, little and brick are more important than the action, and the past indefinite seems more logical, right? So the four criteria together make up the present perfect. And oh my god, there is also a very cool situation which illustrates that. You know those questions that are not really questions. For example, you say, what have you done? Что ты наделал? It's not a question, it's just an exclamation, right? So in this case, the stress is on the verb itself, what have you done? But if you ask a real question, if you really are interested in the actions of this person, you ask, what did you do? So you don't use the present perfect if you want the real answer, right? Because then the attention is on the details, not on the action itself. In a similar way, for instance, if you are speaking with a friend, you're talking with a friend, and then your friend, I don't know, swears publicly, and you are very shocked. You say, "Что ты сказал?" This is not a question at all, right? So you say, "What have you said? Seriously, you swear in public. We have my grandmother here." But then if you just didn't hear what the person has said, right? And you ask a real question, "А что ты сказал?" And what did you say? So here you have the past indefinite, not the present perfect, because what is a detail, right? Okay, so let me come back to you. Again, just to revise, there are three meanings of the present perfect. An accomplished action which is viewed from the moment of speaking as part of the present situation, one. An action which began before the moment of speaking and continues into it or up to it, instead of the present perfect continuous in negative sentences with stative verbs and with passive voice, that's two. And then the third meaning is in a future action in adverbial clauses of time, condition, and concession when there is priority, right? So learn our typical examples, learn the theory, and good luck with the present perfect. Bye!